shots.
Two, one.
Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, March 25th, 2021 meeting of the Northampton School Committee. I'm School Committee member Laura Fallon and I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. This meeting is being held as an online Zoom meeting pursuant to Governor Baker's emergency order modifying the state's open meeting law. This meeting is being audio and video recorded and is being broadcast by Northampton Open Media. I would ask participants to please remain muted throughout the meeting until we reach the public comment period. I'll begin by asking the clerk to please call the roll.
Member Busansky.
Present.
Member Fallon.
Present.
Member Seraphy Cox. I'm not sure she's here yet. Member Condon.
Present.
Member Levy.
Present.
Member Kaufman is absent tonight. Member Goldman.
Present.
Member Voss.
Present.
Member Gold.
Present.
And the mayor is not here tonight either, but you have a quorum.
Thank you. So as always, we'll begin with public comment. If you know you wish to make a public comment, please use the raise hand feature. To raise your hand, you click on participants in the horizontal menu bar either at the top or bottom of your screen. The raise hand feature should be in that column. If you're calling in by phone, you can raise your hand by hitting *9. I will unmute each raised hand one by one and ask if you'd like to make a comment. When you begin, please state your name and your address for the record. To ensure that everyone has an equal opportunity to speak, we ask that you limit your public comments to 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, I'll ask you to please finish your sentence. According to our rules of procedure, the school committee does not respond during public comment as it's your time to speak. So while your comments should be directed to us, please understand if we don't respond. So I'm not seeing any hands yet. Is there anyone here from the public that does wish to speak? Anyone? Going once? Going twice? Okay. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, announcements. Are there any school committee members who wish to make an announcement? You guys are making my first meeting so easy. Okay, our next item on the agenda is recommended actions. On tonight's consent agenda, we have approval of minutes. We have the approval of the December 10th, 2020 school committee meeting, February 11th, 2021 school committee meeting, the February 25th, 2021 school committee budget meeting. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Annie, would you please call the roll?
No, I-
Oh, I'm
All right.
sorry, there a comment, Member Voss.
Thanks. I'm trying to get the date up. I would like to ask to remove the February 11th meeting from the consent agenda, please. Sorry,
Sure.
yeah, February 11th.
Okay, there's been a request to pull the minutes of the February 11th, 2021 school committee meeting from the consent agenda. So the vote will just be on the approval of the December 10th, 2020 meeting minutes and the February 25th, 2021 meeting minutes. Sorry, budget meeting minutes. I don't see it. Seeing no other hands. Okay,
Would you like me to call the roll?
yes, please.
Member Fallon,
Yes.
Member Seraphy Cox,
Yes.
Member Condon,
Yes.
Member Levy,
Yes.
Member Kaufman is not here, Member Goldman,
Yes.
Member Voss,
Yes.
Member Gold,
Yes.
the mayor is not here, and Member Busansky.
Yes.
The vote is unanimous.
Thank you. Member Voss, you asked to pull the minutes.
Yeah, I'd like to add a sentence to the minutes in line with what we went back and forth on for the December minutes, to be clear why, to make the discussion more clear about, I'm trying to see how to get you there. I think it's on page, it's hard when it's electronic, page 3, about regarding the discussion. Well, at the bottom of page 2, top page 3, approve Northampton High School's program of studies. And toward the end of the blurb here, it says, well, I'd like to add the following sentence in context of the discussion about the embedded honors math classes. So there's a little bit there, but I don't think it represents the scope of the discussion. I'd be happy to share this. I wrote it out. I can send it to Annie. I can put it up.
That would
But
be
the-
great.
The sentence, do you want me to share it?
Yeah, can you make the motion with the wording that you're asking
Yes,
us to
so I'll
vote on,
make-
and then also send her the wording?
I'll make a motion, and you want me to share my screen and show my motion to
That would be
add this
great.
wording?
Yeah.
Okay, I can do that. If I can find it. Here we go. Okay. So the motion is to add, after what's already in there, to present a more complete picture. Discussion covered several concerns, including that the new integrated honors model has, 1, not provided current honors students with appropriately advanced work, 2, is inequitable and can hinder the goal it strives to achieve, and 3, community and school committee members were surprised with a substantial change to the curriculum with no feedback.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on that motion to the minutes? Sorry, with the screen share, I can't see if.
Laura, I have my hand up.
Member-
Oh, sorry.
Okay,
Member Fallon.
You can
Yeah, I've got
adjust
it
the
now.
view. Okay.
Okay, so Member Levy, I think had her hand up first.
Go ahead.
Thanks. So I guess it's a question about process, because I thought we had decided that we were not going to put the details of the discussion into the minutes. If we were going to put the details of the discussion into the minutes, I would not have voted to approve the January 10th.
December.
Yeah, thank you. The minutes about the discussion about the change in start time, as they were presented to us. So it's just, I don't have any issues with the substance of what Member Voss is proposing, but it's the concept. If we're going to put these details in, then we need to go back and put them in those minutes as well.
Can I, as a maker of the motion, can I respond to that?
Yes.
I appreciate that. I thought about that and I reread the December ones, and there is some detail in there such as time on learning and other things. And I felt like the detail about this issue in the current minutes was very one-sided and didn't express the other side, because it was more of a discussion that included a range of things, and these were the things that were left out. So I don't disagree with Member Levy, but I think when there is a conversation that especially has accumulated so much community feedback after it, and I would say we should include some, if we're going to include anything, portray the entire discussion and not just parts of it.
Member Busanski.
Sorry.
Oh,
Am I still muted? No, I'm not.
No.
Sorry. I was just really quickly rereading the minutes from December 10th. And I guess like I respectfully disagree. I think that 6B doesn't actually adequately convey the discussion that we had. There are numerous points that are missing. And so again, like, no problem with what you're suggesting, Member Voss, but if we're gonna accept this, then I guess, I don't know if we can change our votes. We just agreed to pass those minutes, but I would want to amend them to be as substantial and detailed as this.
Member Busanski.
I have I guess I'm on to, I have a very minor point. It's just, so maybe Member Voss could accept it as a friendly amendment. I don't know, but in the current paragraph as it stands, or maybe anyway, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down. It says that an honors class has been embedded in the year-long integrated math classes. They're not year-long classes. So I just thought we should just remove the word year-long, or the hyphenated word year-long. So I don't know if that could possibly.
Is that a friendly amendment?
Yes, I don't know if Member Voss will. Oh, looks like Member Voss might be accepting it. Thank you.
Okay, Member Goldman. Oh, did we lose her?
You're muted, Member Goldman.
Thank you. I also am supportive of having the meetings reflect the interest of the committee. However, I think some of these statements are opinion or are debatable where the discussion led to. So this statement says that discussion covered several concerns, like including that the model is inequitable. And I think that that's debate. Some of these issues are debatable, or certain aspects of some of these issues are debatable. And so I would ask that they reflect that in this comment, where you would say, where the statements are not making claims about the program, but is making clear what the topics of concern were that were discussed. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and I'd be happy for a friendly amendment. The way I worded it was concerns, because I know there was at least 2, and
yeah,
both.
and I'm happy for these
Yeah.
issues to be. I'm happy for this to be included in the minutes. I think these are important points, but I guess the friendly amendment would be that at the big, that they're not such clearly one-sided statements. So it may not provide current honor students with appropriately advanced work, or may not be inequitable, or concerns that they are.
Would it be okay? Would it be okay to put some, or what do you, that's what you're saying?
this is a really hot topic, and I'm not trying to disclaim any of these statements, but I'm also I mean, the concerns is the concern that it is inequitable, or is the concern that it may be? Because I don't believe they are, and that's from the information I've received. And so I don't want it to appear that everyone on the committee is voting for something that is inequitable, or some of the, or like with no feedback, that just seems like a bolder statement than I recall from the conversation.
So I hear you. I guess I was trying to capture the concerns, which doesn't mean it's true. It's a
I see what you mean.
concern. And that's why I wrote it that way. And I kind of tried to model it off because we'd been back and forth so much over the December one. But I know that I said these things, and if people are more comfortable attaching their name to it, I purposely kept names out of it, but I would be happy to say Member Voss spoke of several concerns, but I do think these are concerns, and they were discussed, and it doesn't mean a concern is true, but it means that we might have more conversation about it at some point.
Okay, and I guess the one would go before the word has in that first line, at the end of the first line.
Member Gold?
Along the lines of what of the discussion right now, would it suffice? I was trying to look back at December and this one to see if how to align them. Would it suffice to say discussion covered several concerns, including if the new integrated model appropriately provided? So if we use like if statements, then it's not saying if it is or it isn't, but just discusses the sides of it. Like 2 questions about equity, and 3, if, what feedback, if or what feedback was provided. I wonder if that, what is it, community scopes?
Thank you. I'm working on what I think you're saying in the spirit of it. And
Yeah, maybe like something just like provided feedback or had opportunity, chance for feedback. Wonder if that does it. I don't know if that's. And then someone could go, and then the next thing I think it says is like, go to the videotape, and
yep.
Then they could see. I wonder if that does it.
Is there any more discussion before we move to a vote?
So I'll take what I just wrote. I will happily take as a combination of friendly amendments, and I thank you both.
Okay, thank you. A motion has been made and seconded. Annie, will you please call the roll?
Member Seraphy Cox,
Yes.
Member Condon,
Yes.
Member Levy,
Abstain.
Member Kaufman isn't here, Member Goldman,
Yes.
Member Voss,
Yes.
Member Gold,
Yes.
Member Busansky, Member
Yes.
Busansky, okay.
Sorry, I thought that.
And Member Fallon.
Yes.
The vote is 7 in favor and 1 abstention.
Thank you. Moving on to the next item of business, we have a discussion and vote on the FY22 budget. We do have our business administrator, Ms. Lamica, and Superintendent Provost here to answer any questions you may have. I'm not sure if anyone is prepared to make a motion first, or if you'd like to hear from the superintendent about the changes or additions that have been made to the budget. I see him up. Member
I wonder if
Busanski.
she can
Oh.
stop sharing her screen.
Oh, yeah. Member Voss, would you mind? Member, I'm sorry, did I already call on Member Condon?
I will make a
I
motion
thought you
to,
had, okay, sorry. I thought you had called on me already.
Okay,
but-
I didn't hear, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. And I'll be honest, I'm struggling because it says that people are ordered by the most recently raised hand. And so I wasn't sure if that meant it was in reverse order or if it's in order from top to bottom. So if I call on you out of order, that's my apologies for not knowing the system.
It's top to bottom,
Okay,
so you're in the right place.
okay, so Member Busanski is first.
Well, I was just wondering if the superintendent wanted to present the additional slides that he sent to us a couple days ago, and but I'm sure we could someone could make a motion to pass the budget. It could go in either order, but that's what I was hoping we would start with, was the slides, the additional information.
Sure. Are those ready to be shared, or?
They are. Annie,
Okay.
if you would start your screen share, please. Okay, and this looks a little bit messed up on your screen.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Hold on.
It looks like you opened it as a document. Try opening it as a presentation.
Should I download it?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. I'm sorry. No, download it anyway.
If you'd like, I can share it. I have it open in the PDF. That's helpful.
That would be great.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you.
Yep. Is this the accurate one?
Yes, thank you very much.
All right.
Okay, so starting with a little help from my friends, at the conclusion of the first view budget, it was the sense of the committee that we should proceed as planned. We did receive some feedback and questions from committee members at that time and have adjusted the budget accordingly. In order to gather further feedback from the community, I discussed the budget proposal with the 6 school councils at a joint meeting held on March 16th. I received some additional feedback from the councils, which has also been incorporated into the proposed budget that I'm asking you to approve tonight. So we will go through this basically in 2 sections. One is feedback from the school committee, which also includes several slides of answers to questions. And then we have just feedback from the school councils, and I have their feedback incorporated on that single slide. So if we could move on to the next one. So during discussion of the first view budget, committee members expressed a desire for additional clinical supports at the secondary level. Also, noting that we'd included school transportation for elementary schools in our budget, there was also a request to add a late bus at the secondary level. So based on that feedback, we're now proposing to increase therapeutic supports to be provided by CSO from 1 to 1.6 FTEs. That will bring the total for the proposed contract with CSO to $100,000. That's up from $70,000 as was included in our first view budget. We also have the late bus for JFK in the high school for $13,000. This would be the amount to have the bus run 2 days a week at each school. Most likely it'll be a Monday, Wednesday, and Tuesday, Thursday arrangement, although the details haven't been finalized. So moving on. There was discussion of social emotional supports at the high school, and at the time I reported that SABRE screening had not begun at the high school. At this point, it has begun, and so I have some information to share with you on that. So here you can see the results of the high school students who have currently taken the SABREs. SABREs identifies 2 levels of risk, just low risk or some risk. And I would say that in screening results of any kind of multi-tiered system of supports, you expect to find 20 to 25% of students at risk for learning or social emotional difficulties, regardless of the screener you're using. So based on these results, we're not seeing abnormally high levels of social emotional risk in our high school screening results. And this matches what the staff is reporting. Some students who were not experiencing social emotional challenges prior to COVID now are, and some who were struggling before are actually doing much better in the overall context of COVID. But on the whole, it seems that the level of need is approximately the same as it was before, at least based on these screening results. I would note that this is not the full high school. And so it's important to consider whether or not this is a biased sample. And I would note that there are some indications that the sample could be somewhat biased. Female students and white students are overrepresented. So there may be some variance between these results and the risk levels present in the entire population. It may also be that the students who haven't participated yet represent a different profile. Perhaps their non-participation in screening indicates a level of disengagement, but that's just speculative. So please take that with a grain of salt. At any rate, we're increasing clinical supports at the high school in spite of the fact that the data we have so far looks pretty good. So moving on to the next one. A few questions were asked about total enrollment projections for next year. Here are the projections as of Tuesday, and they've since been updated, so I'll verbally tell you some of the updates. What I'm really taking a look at right now are kindergarten sizes. And so these kindergartens have grown since Tuesday. It's noteworthy at this time that all 4 of our elementary schools are currently projected to have more than 45 kindergartners. That's not reflected here because I'm giving you the update from today. But only Jackson Street has 3 kindergartens. Some families currently registering may end up in private schools, but other families will with kindergarten age children will move into town over the summer. So it's hard to know where this number is going to land. It does look high at this time. There's some excess capacity at Jackson Street in kindergarten, and that could be used to reduce class sizes at the other schools through open enrollment. There often are many open enrollment requests for Jackson Street. But I think that even with that, it's likely that we may come back to you with a recommendation to add a 3rd kindergarten at least one of the schools, most likely Leeds or Ryan Road, which then could probably take students through open enrollment as well. So we'll keep an eye on that, and I'll get back to you as those numbers firm up. I can also speak to the early learning experiences of some of our incoming kindergartners. That was a question asked last week, or 2 weeks ago rather. It appears that more than 85% of our currently enrolling kindergartners have preschool. In fact, more than 85% are enrolled in preschool at this time. And among the 15% who aren't currently in preschool, many of them had preschool experience prior to COVID. So that is a reduction from prior years when almost all incoming kindergartners would have had some previous preschool, but it's still well above the statewide average, which is about 50% of students. So I think that's positive for kindergarten. Moving on. So there were some questions about what's being funded from COVID stimulus funds and what's being funded through other sources. So I created this new chart to try to show that in a simplified way. So at a basic level, there are 2 new expenses in this year's budget: COVID mitigation and recovery. You can see those in the bottom of this table in the brown rows. Everything else you see in this table, the personnel, transportation, tuitions, utilities, and other costs have always been part of the budget. But this year, We have COVID mitigation costs, which are the costs of preventing disease spread, and recovery costs, which are costs of helping students recover and catch up. So both academically and social emotionally. We also have a new source of funding, which is the COVID stimulus. So the last column you see here is a new column that you wouldn't have seen in other years. And this is just a combination of all the various stimulus programs. I mentioned last time there are 7 COVID stimulus programs in the budget. There's currently an 8th one working its way down to us. And those are shown in the last column. For the sake of transparency, I broke out transportation expenses from after school programming, but the $56,500 you see for transportation in the COVID column is really a recovery cost because that's connected to academic programming. So in this proposal, we're now recommending that we spend $1.2 million of stimulus funds, split roughly equally between disease mitigation and recovery efforts. There's also a new proposal for staff retention. I'll explain that in a minute. That comes from the school councils. Before moving on to feedback from the school councils, I'd like to address other questions that have been submitted by members of the school committee. The fact that some personnel line items are down raised a question about salary increases. I want to ensure you that pay increases are included in the budget. However, there's always turnover with new staff replacing veteran teachers who had higher salaries. And this can result in a budget decrease because the staff that we currently have in our budgeting for next year may be at lower steps than staff we had in prior years who are part of this year's budget. So with steps, salary increases for teachers are ranging from 5 to 8%. ESPs 5.97%, custodians 5%, Unit B administrators 6.25%, and clerical 2.38%. You wouldn't be able to tell that by looking at personnel line items because, as I said, the personnel reflected in those line items changes from year to year. But when you go through the units and have both the effect of the steps and the COLAs, those are what the salary increases look like in those units. In a similar vein, there was a question about the size of the increase in transition educator salary, and this is the same kind of scenario. In this case, we filled the position with someone who came to us with more experience, so the salary was higher than anticipated. So again, it's not a case of someone getting an extra large rate pay increase. It's the fact that there's a new staff member coming in there at a higher range that was budgeted based on their experience. And so you see that line item go up. There was a question about the foundation budget, which is the first item under tab 14. It shows a per pupil amount that doesn't match our budget. That's because the foundation budget shows the calculation used to determine the minimum amount each community can spend on educating its students. We spend substantially more than the minimum, so our actual spending figures are much higher than the amounts you'll see in the foundation budget page. And finally, there was a question from a school committee member about the apparent reduction in funding for the school lunch program. So to explain that, I have to say there was an infusion of additional funding into food services in fiscal 20, which is the beginning of COVID, to start the emergency meal program. If you recall, back at that time, we weren't sure how anything was getting funded. All we knew is that we needed to feed our students. And so we were transferring funds into that cost center in order to support the program. Since that time, the federal government has funded emergency meal programming, and this is next year's budget. So we're projecting that next year we will no longer be needing to continue the emergency meal programming. So overall, this isn't an increase in the funding for the school lunch program. It's just that when you take out the additional funds that were being used for the emergency meal program, it appears as a reduction. So those were the questions submitted by school committee members. I'll turn now to the feedback from the school councils. And as I explained earlier, once the school committee indicates its agreement with the first view budget, I always follow up by meeting with the other elected representatives for our schools, which are the school councils. I'm happy to report that the budget has unanimous support from the school councils. And by that, I don't just mean that it passed with a majority of all 6 councils, but every single member from all 6 councils voted to support the budget. They did so with a recommendation. They were asking that a statement be made that we'd look for ways to add funding and intentional efforts around retention of a diverse workforce. The feedback they provided was that they see a lot of effort and a lot of action around recruiting a diverse workforce, but not much in terms of retention. And so some of the members followed up with suggestions after the meeting, and some of the things were things that could only be done through collective bargaining. But there were 2 suggestions that are immediately actionable. So I'd like to go farther than just making a statement of, intention or aspiration to provide funding for the support of retention of a diverse workforce. I want to propose these 2 programs. One of the ideas was that we do a needs assessment or have an outside group do a needs assessment and develop a retention plan for us. As I've shared before, Northampton is a member of the Diverse Teacher Workforce Coalition, which includes the 5 colleges, several other institutions of higher ed that are not part of the 5 colleges, and several local school districts. So I reached out to the facilitator who is with the 5 colleges and asked if they could bring some of the experts, some of the local experts in to develop a needs assessment and a plan for us. As we were talking, it seems like this will probably be a 2-part process over the course of 2 years. And ballpark figure we have to conduct a needs assessment would be about $10,000. Another suggestion that came from the school councils was funding teacher participation in affinity groups. As I've shared before, through our work with the CES, one of the things we've done to support educators in a more diverse workplace is the creation of affinity groups and the training of group leaders this year. But I had envisioned that as an activity that we would fund and get started, and then we would see what the participation in it was like. However, the school councils pointed out to me, if we paid people to participate, in other words, if we paid them the contractual rate of $30 an hour to participate in the affinity groups, then it might be more accessible to some people who wouldn't necessarily have to make a choice between doing the groups or doing a second job. And it might also just be more attractive to other people. So I'm also just on the basis of the current size of individuals that we have in affinity groups, based on the idea of potentially 1 meeting a month, I'm proposing to add $30,000 to pay staff who are members of the affinity groups for participation in those activities. So that brings me to the end of the adjustments we've made and the responses to all the questions that came up during the public comment period. I'm happy to answer any final questions you might have, and I look forward to a final vote to approve our FY22 budget.
Thank you, Superintendent Provost. I see some hands up. Member Condon, your hand is up first.
Yes, to get things rolling, I'd like to make a motion to accept the FY22 budget as proposed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded to accept the FY22 budget as presented. I see more hands. I'm assuming those might be questions. Member Seraphy Cox.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. One is I was looking through the statement from the maintenance and capital planning section, and I was surprised to see kind of no mention of the changes that we did this year related to HVAC systems and HEPA filters. So I'm wondering, if I could maybe get an update on what is the status of maintenance of those systems? How are they doing with the strain that we've been putting on them with opening the dampers more, all of the things that we talked about in terms of ensuring safe ventilation for staff and students. And then I have a second question as well.
Sure. So as I mentioned, when we were buying the HEPA filters, those filters have a 3-year replacement rate. So they're still very early in their life cycle and they're all going strong. There were some concerns that putting the MERV 13 filtration into the univentilators would create a strain on the system because there's some back pressure due to the more dense filtration, but that has not turned out to be the case. We haven't had any systems fail because of that. There was also a concern about some potential freezing due to having the dampers open more during the cold weather. And it looks like we're through the cold weather, as I think we made 80 degrees today, but we got through the winter without any freezing. So that has all worked out very well.
Okay, thank you. I think that it's probably something to continue to have our eye on, as increased wear and tear is not necessarily a breakdown, but can happen in the future. So let's definitely keep an eye on it. And then I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the reduction of the first grade teacher at Leeds. And I also, when you were talking about kindergarten, you were talking about potentially increasing the kindergarten there by one class. And I don't know if there has been any thought put to maybe if you are going to increase that kindergarten to do maybe a combined class of kindergarten and first grade. There may be some considerations there, but just kind of asking those questions. Sure.
So you have this document, but if you go to slide 4, which is the current projections, you can see that we're looking at 37 students in first grade for next year. So I think that the reduction from 3 sections to 2 sections will not be problematic. The question that I thought you're going to ask is about, well, if we need to add a first grade potentially at Leeds, would we just be, a kindergarten, would we just be cycling that position down, which is a potential outcome. Right now, I can't tell whether it would be at Ryan Road or at Leeds. If you look at the numbers at Ryan Road are actually higher, so it would probably make sense to, if I had to do it today, say that the 3rd class should be added at Ryan Road. But, this will change on a daily basis between now and the time we need to make the final call. I'm just saying that at this point, it looks like it will be one of those 2 schools. I'm feeling like I'm missing something from your question. Oh, the combined kindergarten, first grade, or first, second grade. Yeah, we always look at that. That could be a possibility based on the needs of the students, the skill levels of the students. But we haven't begun discussions about that yet.
Got it. And then, sorry, I know that I said I only had one additional question. The other thing is, I think there was one piece that was maybe missing from your summation of the feedback from the school committee that I heard from last meeting, which was, yes, absolutely, in terms of social emotional support for the high school, but also in terms of academic catch-up for the high school. And I know that there's ESPs in the high school that have been added, but I'm wondering, there's a really specific plan at the elementary school about how to utilize the ESPs for extra support. So I guess I'm not quite seeing the vision for the high school yet.
Sure, and that's because I forgot to put it in. There is, sorry, it's been a really busy week. There is an academic plan for the high school as well. It's focused mainly on summer supports, which is the time when most remediation is done at the high school level. So we are adding additional credit recovery classes. We have not an extraordinarily high number of students who are failing, but it is a little bit higher. So typically our first semester failures would be around 20 to 30 students. This time we see it running about 30 to 40 students, so there's definitely an uptick there. So we're adding credit recovery classes for this summer in the 4 core areas. We are also adding a acceleration program to get in pre-calc to get students ready to take calculus in the fall. So I should have added that in this presentation, and I'm sorry I left that part out.
Okay, well, and now it's my turn to say, oh, and I thought you would have said, I thought you were going to say, well, the late bus is there as an academic support. So I don't know if that's true, but if it is, now might be an opportunity for you to say that.
Yes, it's true. It's true. But I mean, well, I was focused on things that we're planning on doing in the summer to get students ready to start again. But that late bus will be there to support them all throughout the year.
Member Levy.
Thanks. Some of my questions were just asked. And I want to follow up on Member Seraphy Cox's questioning about the high school academic support. Before I do that, though, I want to really commend the addition to the budget of the retention efforts for diverse staff. And I really appreciate the school council's recommendations, and seeing them in there is exciting to me. But so about the high school academic support, I guess my concern is about the amount of students who aren't actually failing courses, but are also not learning what they might in order to succeed, be as successful as they would have potentially.
Sorry.
I know, I've
Let
heard
me-
that too. So again, so my concern is about the students who are not, who need academic support, but maybe aren't on the level of failing a class and therefore needing the credit recovery. Can you talk a little bit about what the plan is for students aside from the late bus to ensure that they are prepared for advancing coursework?
Sure, I'm sorry. Let me, Scout, please. So my wonderful dog training skills. Anyways, yeah, so when students come back, we're going to have to follow a similar process that we used this year of assessing their skills at the beginning of the units and making adjustments on that basis. So this year, for example, we have common assessments that we were able to use for the first time, so that we're able to identify areas where kids needed extra help. And we're going to have to do that again. So there'll be adjustments made in the general ed setting. I'm sorry, I'm here alone. I can't put the dog anywhere else. So that same process that we used in remote will have to be done in person.
Okay, and that's set up to catch the kids, the students who have slid but are doing okay, but have slid below where they were before.
Correct. So these are kids who would go into the next course, their next sequential courses, but we're not necessarily assuming that they're going to come in as they would have if we were in person for the entire year.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to share a concern about kindergarten. Looking at the numbers, the idea of adding one kindergarten teacher to the 4 schools feels really inadequate as I look at these numbers. I mean, most of these, and you say that they're likely to go up. We're talking 23, 24 kindergartners in a class. And that's too many. So I'm concerned that you're talking about, I mean, when I look at these numbers, knowing that they may go up, I would want to see 3 kindergarten classes at all of the schools, not just 2 of them.
So I said that I think we need to add at least one more, or it's likely that we're going to have to add at least one more. But the numbers vary so much. It's really hard for me to say where these will end up. I guess what I'm saying is I'm keeping a close eye on it. And right now, we don't have the kindergartens included in the budget. And it's likely that I'll be coming back to you later in the spring and saying, we have a better sense of enrollment now. We need to add at least one class, maybe more classes. But I will be reporting back to you on that.
Okay, I appreciate that. Can you give me a sense of what you would be aiming for in terms of class size for kindergarten?
So, I feel really good about a class size that's 18 to 20. When it gets above that for kindergarten, it starts to feel a little bit big for me.
Okay, thanks. I think 20 feels big as well. But okay, I hear that. Thank you. And then last question, can you name which affinity groups have gotten off the ground at this point?
So we've done the training for the facilitators. I'm not sure how many different groups have identified by a certain identity. What I can do is reach out to the trained facilitators and get back to you with those identity groups.
Thanks, I'd appreciate that. Those are all my questions.
Thanks. Member Busansky.
Thanks. Sorry, it took me a moment to unmute. Well, first, Superintendent Provost, we've been on Zoom for over a year and we haven't heard from your dog until now. I think that's really impressive. So, secondly, I just wanted to understand better the additions to the high school around, so the clinical support options addition, it looks like an additional 30,000 that you're proposing putting towards that. And what exactly does clinical support options do in our high school or provide?
So currently, CSO provides individual case services for students who are referred to them through the school. Right now, that's for a very limited number of students, and we don't have any dedicated staff. It's all third-party payer. So what this would allow us to do is bring in an additional 1.6 FTEs, which could be both for the high school and the middle school, depending on, we want to be a little bit flexible on how we deploy that. But these are therapeutic staff who don't have to worry about going through third-party payers. They essentially are forces that buttress our counseling supports that are currently in place. So we would pay for the services instead of going through insurance, and they would be additional therapeutic staff that we could refer students to if our counselors became overwhelmed, or if our counselors thought that it was going to be more of a long-term issue where they might want to transition over to a third-party payer and have a more long-term counseling relationship. So it's basically to bring the community supports right into the school, like, sort of the community school concept in the area of mental health services.
Thank you. And so it would be a 1.6 full-time staff. So a person and a half roughly, or whatever, would be in, let's say, in NHS, and they'd be seeing students throughout the course of the day, or how does that exactly work? Correct.
So currently we do, in the model that we currently have, most of the counseling service takes place at the end of the day. With this model, we would have the counselors available throughout the day. And with the late bus, there is the potential to have services after school on those days when the late bus is running.
Okay, and then how are you going to make that decision about whether it's in the middle school or high school, or where that 1.6?
Based on recommendations from the staff, from the counseling staff at both schools.
So it'll be decided before the school year starts, or you're saying it'll change on a, as needed basis?
On an as needed basis. We have, when the students come back in the fall, there's going to have to be an emotional assessment, much like there is right now. There will be Also, there may be changes in staffing that we're not aware of that may hit between now and the fall. So what we're saying to the clinical staff is, here's an additional support. Tell us where you really need the help, and we'll put the help there for you.
Got it. Oh, that's great to hear. Sorry, I froze a bit, I think. And then secondly, I just want to understand the late bus for JFK and NHS. Can you just repeat again which days it's just the timing days? What's the structure of it?
So this amount, the 13,000 and change, is enough to run 4 days a week. So as we envision it now, it will be 2 days for each school. We haven't decided for sure which days for each school, but I imagine it's most likely to be a Monday, Wednesday at one school and a Thursday, Friday at the other school, so that students who have different schedules would have opportunities to stay after school different days of the week. And then, it's not door-to-door transportation. We'd be dropping students off at different hubs within the city. But it would provide an option for kids who maybe just need a little bit of help, need to review something with a teacher, may need to retake a test after school or prepare something for the next day, but who can't do that right now because they don't have transportation. It would eliminate that barrier for them.
And what time would the bus be picking up? I guess I'm not clear on that when you say a late bus. Is this like an hour after school ends? Is this,
So I would say that the late bus would have to run about the same time the elementary late buses do, because high school is now the first tier, so it'd have to work its way through all the tiers. So I would say it'd be about an hour and a half after the end of the school day, roughly.
Okay. And how are you going to connect, or how's JFK and NHS going to connect the late bus to additional school learning supports and additional mental health supports? I mean, NHS, I know, has a long history, though it's not baked into the contract, of teachers staying after school 1 or 2 days a week for extra help, but but JFK does not have that at all. So what I don't really understand what this extra hour and a half is going to do for kids.
So I don't know that teachers don't stay after to help kids at JFK. I think that does. I think that does happen for a lot of teachers. I think what the difference would be is if we had a schedule set up and teachers were able to stay on days that match the buses. I think they would try to make themselves available on those days. It wouldn't work for every teacher. Teachers have other lives outside of school, and this schedule may not work for them, but it just creates another opportunity for us to maybe be able to get a kid another level of support by eliminating a barrier that just puts it out of the question for a lot of kids right now.
Okay. So, I guess, it just kind of feels like, at the last meeting, I think what I heard was that I also proposed that we needed more mental health support for kids at the high school. And what it's really sounding like to me is that we're putting this additional 30,000 into CSO, and that just seems inadequate. Based on, there's one thing to look at the Sabres, results that you presented, but, the headline in the paper this week was the CDC's reporting a 40% increase, or 40% of the population is suffering from mental health needs. Every therapist I talked to, I just ran into one last week who's an adolescent therapist in Northampton, says you cannot find an appointment anywhere for adolescent therapists if you have a child in need. I just think we have a major mental health. We had a big mental health issue on our hands before the pandemic at the high school, and it is just only increasing during this pandemic. And we need to do, I was hoping to see, let me rephrase that, something a little bit more global at the high school, that we sort of along the lines of the social emotional coach. We had looked at that last year for elementary school, or something to provide teachers with support, or being able to identify mental health needs, working more closely with parents to figure out what kids are needing. Whatever, I could think of a million things, but that doesn't really matter. It shouldn't, so I feel like there just needs to be more in this budget to address those mental health needs. I also feel a little concerned about, the late bus, that And I don't doubt that JFK teachers stay after school with their students. I really don't. But what I meant by more baked in is that every kid sits down in an NHS class and and their teacher usually has up on the board the days they're going to stay after, they'll be after school. If you want extra help, Tuesday and Thursday from 3 to 4. I never saw that at JFK, but I have no doubt that they're doing extra hours with kids for sure. But, if we're not going to pay teachers to do it or organize it in some way, I just worry that it's going to be sort of money we're throwing at a late bus without really having the kind of like support there that needs to happen. So I just feel really, anyway, I'm just left feeling really concerned. And I'd like to see more put towards that, especially. And I also think we have the culture coordinator at JFK. We don't have anything at, NHS.
So my responses to both of those are kind of the same. Both of these are scalable in both directions, right? You gave me direction 2 weeks ago. You thought that we could use more support at the clinical support at the high school. And I came back to you with another part of a position. What I would propose is that, we start with this. If it's inadequate, I can come to you and ask you to expand the contract and we can bring more in. It does seem to me, honestly, to be adequate based on both our data, our quantitative data, and with what we're seeing in the school from staff. You look at a number of behavioral issues that have historically been seen throughout the schools. We're not seeing them right now. Part of that is because we have fewer kids in school, so that will change. Part of that is because we're in COVID protocols, and I think everyone's behavior is just so different because we're wearing masks, we're social distancing, we're doing all these things. And I think that, as those controls come off, we might start to see some other things, but it's just not present now. But if it does, I promise you, I'll come back and say, it's looking like it's not enough, we need to add. Same way with the bus, if it's looking like no one's riding this bus, I can say, you know what, it wasn't such a great idea. Maybe we should stop it. For several years, we've wanted to have a late bus. We've always felt like it was a shortcoming in our program. Now we have a chance to do it. So I think it's a good time to try it and see whether or not it helps.
Yeah, I guess what I'm really suggesting around like CSO and the mental health needs is I was hoping for an additional line item, not more money put into CSO per se, just and some additional line items even of like ideas of how to approach mental health. I think if we're, I think it's going to be really important, especially at the beginning of the school year, and to be proactive and not reactive and be able to identify these issues. And there's lots of different ways to identify the mental health issues that our kids, that high school students are experiencing, right? But that's going to take not just having a therapist or a counselor for them to go to, though that's great. I'm not trying to take away from that. I was just hoping for even more ideas in the, to be reflected in this budget, that we were really being proactive. And then we could always remove. I would rather work the other way, add now, and then say, hey, looks like we don't need this. Now we're going to remove, but we need to really be able to identify and help those kids who are having, anxiety, depression, the whole package of it. So,
well, I do think there's something in there which might not be obvious, in part because I didn't put it on any of the slides, but it's all that summer work. The credit recovery we're doing. What we're finding is the kids who are struggling at the most extreme level, kids who are not passing their classes, are kids who have really become disengaged. So the goal of the credit recovery is to get them back on track academically, but really it's to help them reestablish the habit of coming to school. And I think that is probably the biggest challenge we're facing in terms of a small number of students who are having the most acute, what I would consider to be behavioral issues right now, even though it's not acting out behavior, it's checking out behavior. And so I do think we'll do a lot of good through that summer programming.
Okay, well, I feel like I appreciate that. I do. I just still feel like that's, inadequate in addressing mental health needs our kids are coming back with at the high school, because I think we are addressing it at the middle school more so. So, but I'll leave it at that. Other people have hands up. I'd like to hear what my other school committee members have to say too. So.
Member Voss.
Thank you. So I have a bunch of little easy questions, but just some of my bigger picture stuff follows this. So I'll start with that. And I know through subcommittee meetings and our past couple full committee meetings, we have talked about what are we doing to support middle and high school students. And I really want to just say I agree with what Member Busansky just said, not to repeat it, but I'm going to add to it. I share her concerns about the mental health. I also share them about academic support. And I really was hoping to see more here. I've been trying to say, we shouldn't say what it is, let the educators say what it is, but I feel like we could do a lot more. And I'm frankly just disappointed, and I still think we can do better. People are busy, but we need to make time to figure this out. And specifically, just helping the kids who are failing or almost failing or appear to be misbehaving isn't enough, because all these kids have had a year that has just stunk. And I bet every single kid needs extra help in some way. And I don't know that you can identify who needs what right now, but we need more smaller classes, whatever it is. I'm not going to say exactly how to address it, but I'll give a few ideas. I mean, I love that there's a late bus. It gives people a chance to stay after school and get help from teachers, but I agree, we need to make that more structured and put it there and say, this is what's happening, so that families actually take advantage of it. And do the teachers know what the kids have been through for the past year? Maybe parent-teacher conferences, which we've mentioned before. Maybe there's other ways at the high school level. But at the elementary school, I love it that we're paying our educators to work with our students, the people that know each other the best. Why aren't we trying to use some money to pay educators at JFK in the high school to stay after in a more formal way and make this a priority for everybody to participate in? And it's, you know, a strange place to be saying we have money to do this stuff and we don't even know how much, because every time you read the paper, it seems like, fortunately, the change in our federal government is going to be giving us more money, and we should be thinking ahead now. And if we don't have the money, then come back and say, maybe we can't afford it. But I just think these things are so doable, and next year is the most important year to do them. So I would like to see more of our educators supporting our students. And then just quickly along those lines, that I emailed a little bit. I think we could do a lot better with even just the summer. There's this pre-calculus catch-up class to enable students to take calculus next year. It's costing $2,500, and I'm a firm believer in you get what you pay for. And I'm sure whatever is planned is going to be good, but is it enough? Should we be doing more? Is this an opportunity to say to kids who might not really think they are wanting to take pre-calc, hey, you know what? There's this opportunity to take pre-calc this summer, and then you could take calculus. We've spent all this time talking about encouraging kids to take more advanced math. Well, maybe if we throw a little more money at this, we can have more support and get kids who are a little less certain about math enjoying pre-calc this summer. So I just think we should think bigger. And I know there's not a lot of room for that, but I want to see more at the high school in terms of funding things to help our students thrive right now. Okay. And then I had just a couple questions in your talk, Dr. Provost. I agree with what people said about kindergarten completely. And I wanted to know, are we not accepting school choice students in kindergarten?
No, I haven't given you recommendations for that yet, but I'm likely to recommend that we only accept students in grades 6 and 9. I want to see what happens with Smith Voc first to know what the 9th grade looks like.
I think that I very much support that. I think next year, the best thing we can do for our students is to keep their classes as small as possible. And that's another question. I know you really don't want to, I understand why, and we had this discussion in depth in subcommittee, use stimulus funds to hire, I don't know what to call them, but long-term staff that we pay the way you do so that we have unemployment issues. But at the same time, over a 3-year period, if we have stimulus funds and we have turnover in our educators, if we were to hire a few extra teachers, I feel like we could probably keep our teachers in the district. I'll leave it to your judgment on that, but I just wonder if those stimulus funds are a place we could hire a couple extra kindergarten teachers to say, these kids, you know, had a really unusual year last year and we need to keep these classes small. So I would very much support that. And then your other slide about funding sources for various budget components. I agree that the money for retention is really important, but my question is, how do we justify that money coming out of COVID stimulus? And that doesn't mean we don't do it. It just means, is there other money that can be applied to COVID stimulus so that we budget more transparently?
Right. So we haven't seen what the rules are going to be on the new COVID funds. If we can't pay for this $40,000 out of that grant money, I'm sure we can find something else that qualifies to free up the $40,000. So the ultimate source, if you will, would be COVID, because that's the place we have flexibility within the budget for the reasons you just explained. With respect to kindergarten, I think if it's, if we add positions, I have to come back with you for a plan for it that doesn't include the COVID money, because those kindergartners then become first graders and then they become second graders. So those are not just positions for this year if we need them. They're likely to be positions that we need for the next 13 years.
Well, no, I would disagree. You can have a much smaller kindergarten class and it can be slightly bigger with the ESPs in first grade, right?
What I'm saying is that the students move up a grade each year, and you can expand the classes somewhat, but typically when you get a big bump, in enrollment, you have that the whole time they're with us. And that's why you have some classes, I'm not going back to the other slide, but you have some classes that have been like 3 when they were in, 3 sections in first grade, which then became 3 sections in second grade this year. That's kind of what's happening at Leeds right now.
But I think where I'm just trying to disagree a little bit is having more teachers doesn't bring more students unless you add school choice, which I think we just said we're not. So you have a set number of students, and if you offer them a smaller kindergarten experience for reasons that I'm sure we could justify if we wanted to, next year when they go to first grade, maybe they have 20 in a class or 21 instead of 16. But this year, when they're coming out of the pandemic and haven't had socialization for a year, having the smaller kindergarten class seems to me to be money really well invested. And yeah, they'll have a bigger class in future years. Those were my questions about your presentation. So I think my really big take home is I'd like to see more aggressive support at the high school is my biggest take home. I do want to share with the committee some questions I emailed Dr. Provost, and I still have concerns about, and they're more about capital improvement money. And I understand that that's not exactly what we're voting on, but it is in our budget book. And there might be 1 or 2 things that are appropriate for us to talk about. In terms of, one of them is ventilation in the school. So that was already brought up, but our schools are really poorly ventilated, and we've put Band-Aids on it with these HEPA filters, which is great right now. But the national conversation seems to be across the board, there's going to be funding to get schools better ventilated. And what people say are these poorly ventilated spaces lead to all sorts of flu and other viruses flowing through the schools in normal years, and also make kids sleepy because they're not getting enough fresh air. And the bottom line of what we've learned this year is we don't meet code for fresh air coming into our schools. And we managed to figure out how to keep it as safe as possible with the HEPA filters, and that's great, but I don't think that's a long-term solution. And I really want us to keep in mind that with the stimulus money coming in, we would probably be really smart to hire a mechanical engineer to figure out what it is we need to have ventilation that at least meets code and keep our students as healthy as possible and as alert as possible. So that, Dr. Provost, where does that fit? If community members, and I have several who have written me about that, and school committee members want to see that be a conversation going forward, how do we do that?
So that would be capital improvements. That would be in the capital budget. We do have a very detailed report from the mechanical engineers, so it identifies some areas that are hot spots for us, or at least gives us a way to prioritize things that we would want to upgrade. And so I would expect that to be part of the discussion when we do the capital budget next October.
Okay, and I mean, I think I really encourage us to do that because there's all this federal money coming in for this stuff. And to me, that's where some of this federal money should be being spent right now. The other thing that I wrote about was as a member of the Budget and Property Subcommittee, I was part of this discussion, and I think we remember it slightly differently, but we're budgeting for a school bus next year that costs $110,000 in capital improvement money. And last year we talked about starting a conversation to plan toward moving toward electric vehicles. There's an enormous amount of community support. I won't go on and on about why I think it makes a lot of sense, but I'm happy to answer questions if there are any. And where we left it in the committee was a year ago, we needed to move ahead and get the bus we got, but we would keep talking about it because there were all sorts of really incredible grants. The technology is changing very quickly. And, it was right before COVID hit. So I understand there's been a delay, but I think we need to get back to that before we spend $110,000 on a bus. And what I'm left with is, can we delay spending $110,000 on a bus until we understand our long-term plan moving forward? Ms. Lieber was going to look into all these grants. I'd done a lot of research on them. I was essentially asked not to, so I didn't, and that's fine. But I feel pretty passionate that we need to go back to this and figure out what our plan is before we start buying technology that is going to be outdated soon and is really terrible for the environment. So I don't know, Dr. Provost, if you have a sort of a way you could phrase this so we could get to that plan and get that research done. And honestly, I'd be happy to just pull that off the budget and ask to come back to it after we have more of a discussion, maybe in subcommittee.
So I guess I would just ask Cammie to speak to the first part of your question, which is, do we really need the bus? I also use this as an opportunity to say that she has to leave very shortly. So if there are any other things that touch on operations or more detailed financial questions, I think this will be the time to ask them.
Well, for some reason, my video's not working. I have no idea why. My audio's working, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, so to answer your question about the bus, we did work through a lot of pieces of it last year when we were asked to look at the electric buses. The grants to pay for it were one of the pieces that we looked at because the cost of an electric bus is considerably higher. We would need to put in a request with the city capital money to buy an electric bus rather than replace the bus that we have, our normal regular buses. And the other piece that we ran into at the same time is the charging stations, the mechanics that we have at DPW that repair our buses, where we're going to get those repairs. We've talked to other communities, and that's why at that point it became more of a standstill of we don't have enough information because not enough people around here have them, so we can figure out how to do all this operationally. And these are our 4 buses within our district that transport our special education students and preschool students for the most part. They have hydraulic lifts on them. So there's a number of things that when we looked at electric buses, we questioned, how are we going to do that with these kind of buses? So we do need to replace the bus because there's hydraulics, there's you're going to start paying more repair bills on things. And we do have this replacement cycle. We put in a capital request that the city capital funds would fund half of the bus, and our bus revolving account pays for the other half of the bus. Is how it would end up getting funded. And we replace one of those every 5 years. And we did not replace one this year because we got the 7D van instead, trying to meet that need.
Sorry, Member Voss, is it okay if I ask before the business manager has to leave, if there's anyone else with questions to direct specifically at her? Member Condon, Member Golds, and Member Seraphy Cox all had their hands up. Are there any of you who wanted specifically to ask questions of the business administrator?
I do not have a specific question for her, no.
I guess my question sort of I don't know if Dr. Provost is gonna ask, let Cami to chime in on. So yeah, mine could relate to that. Yes, potentially.
Okay.
All right. So my question is, it sort of relates to the conversations about the social emotional needs that are potentially there and academic needs. If I'm not mistaken, I was looking through the previous slides. We have currently allocated years, like next to the 1 year and then 2 years ahead, 2 or 3 years ahead of the COVID stimulus funds. And some of those are already available. And so I'm wondering, will there be some sort of needs assessment done once the high school students come back and all the elementary students come back, where in the end of May or June, Dr. Provost, you might come to us and say, based on the needs assessment we're seeing, we might be able to use, I'm requesting that these COVID relief funds, rather than be used in 2022 or 2023, one of the, we use this year to address the current needs. Is that a realistic possibility?
Yes, so that is something I said at the last meeting. There's another round of assessment coming up at the end of the year. Just to your first point, so we have 3 years of COVID funding that we're talking about, and $4 million. The first year is the year we're in right now. And so we're spending about $1.5 million this year of COVID money. Next year, it would be about a little bit more than $1.5 million of COVID money. And then that would leave us with a little less than $1 million for the third year. Now there is that whole new bucket of money that's working its way down. We don't know what that's going to be yet, but I expect that that'll be there to spend in FY23 and possibly FY24.
And so I guess my question is that money for FY22 and 23 that's currently allocated for those years, and maybe this is where Cami comes, it would be available to spend some of that in June if, based on your needs assessment, you realize that there's more supports needed that you could use this money for at the end, by the end of May or June this year. Is that correct to say?
Well, I know that was directed at Cami, but I just want to say the $1.5 million is already in this budget. So that's already spent. You can't spend that twice. You could spend the 23 money for next year.
Gotcha. So
based on the results of the assessments. Kimmy, would you add anything to that?
And if not, no worries. Okay, so that's. That's all I got there.
Is Cami still with us?
I'm not sure if that's her phone number.
No, she had a name, so I think she might be gone now.
Okay.
I'm almost done.
Okay. Yeah, if we see Cami come back on, someone let me know. I know that she's running out of time, that she can be with us. So proceed.
Thank you. So that's my concern with the bus, and I'm gonna make a amendment, I think, to address it and see what people think. Can I do that?
Can I ask a question? I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Sure.
You're not talking about the bus that was already in the 5-year, the capital improvement plan that was already accepted, right?
I don't know, because we switched the buses last year, but my amendment isn't why don't you let me try to make it and see if it matters? Because I'm trying to balance. I don't know.
Well, I guess it does matter if, can you tell us where the bus, what page you're looking at?
Yep. Why did I say my other thing? And then you can come back to me on this and I will figure that out, okay? Then other people can have the floor. I just have one other thing. And I'll just say my proposal for both these things, the bus and the issue of pesticides on the school grounds, both in my mind fit under things that we were supposed to address last year. And because of COVID, we did not. And it's really important, I think, that we talk about these things, and I want to make sure that they get referred back to the Budget and Property Subcommittee and that we have a school committee-wide support to address them this year, kind of like we had a year ago, we said, okay, we're going to work on late start. And so there's quite a bit of money in this budget for school grounds, and I don't know how much of it supports the pesticides, and I'm not going to make us go down that rabbit hole, but my amendment will be something along the lines, and it can be separate for the two, of just, I want to see us to have a plan to move both of these issues forward. And right now they seem to be, victims of COVID, and I don't want them to be forgotten. So I'll figure out the capital funds, and I'd like to make some sort of amendment. If anybody has ideas for having plans for dealing with those two things, I'd love to hear them. Thank you.
Member Gold, were you done with your questions?
Yes. Well, so just to confirm, Dr. Provost, that million for 23, potentially based on need, you could move up the spending to the 22 budget.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Member Condon, your hand is up.
Thank you, Member Fallon. So I'll start by saying, coming into this budget season, I was pretty nervous that we'd be facing some deep cuts due to unanticipated COVID costs and city revenue decline. So when I saw what was presented, and I'm thankful to the mayor and the city. I wish Mayor Narkowitz was here so I could thank him for not cutting the education budget this year. I'm pretty happy with the additional supports that Dr. Provost has presented for us based on what we see in the community as need, what's been presented by community members and so forth. Is it perfect? Does it provide for every single student, for every single need? No. Does any budget ever do that? No. So I guess I'd ask, and I've asked this before, I do appreciate members' concerns about areas and wanting to add more supports here and more supports there. But if we do that, we have to take money away from somewhere else. And so to keep that in mind. And I guess if you are pushing for supports in certain areas, think about, okay, where are we going to cut? Who is going to have money taken away from them, basically? So just to keep that in mind as we're looking at Dr. Provost's budget and debating its merit.
Thank you. Member Sarah Peacock.
Thanks. I guess there was something that you said, Superintendent Provost, about the timing for talking about the capital improvements is in October. So I'm wondering, how often do we plan for capital improvements? What is that process? I don't remember this past October approving a capital improvement budget, although I was in the middle of negotiations, so I might just not remember.
Yes, so the Central Services Department prepares a list of proposed capital improvements on behalf of the district. It goes to the school committee for their approval first, and then it goes to the capital planning board, which is a city body that reviews and evaluates them. Every capital project is assigned a priority by that group. And then they develop a multi-year plan for how they're going to fund the projects. So this past year, you're right, it didn't come to the school committee because there were many items that were left on the plan from prior years. And they were basically only hitting the very high priority issues because everyone was dealing with COVID and we weren't certain about what finances were going to be like. So there were no new additions to the capital plan this year, which is why it didn't come to the school committee. But I expect we'll be on a more normal basis next year. And so the process that I just described would be followed.
So then I think this is to Member Fallon's question, is the bus replacement of the 30 passenger wheelchair van or bus for 110,000 that is listed in the city of Northampton form, which is in section 15. That was passed through the capital improvement process in, say, October of 2019.
In prior years, yes. So the bus replacement schedule actually goes out several years. I believe it's more than 5 years. And the way that is typically funded is 50% through the bus pass receipts and 50% through capital funds from the city.
So then the portion of the decision that we are making tonight is to approve the use of the revolving account to support something that the school committee has already approved in a previous year.
I would say that's fair. I mean, really, I think the biggest question that the school committee is being asked for tonight is to approve the appropriation amount.
Sure.
Which is separate from that item because the revolving account isn't part of that. The capital improvement isn't part of that. But that one little piece of the budget, it is fair to say, was discussed as part of prior capital improvement plans and was also discussed in the budget and property subcommittee. All that Member Voss was just saying about looking if there was a better option, if there were electric buses, was a study because we were thinking about possibly swapping one of the typical buses for an electric bus. We also have had a change that we've made in the past where we changed a bus to several vans because we were having trouble finding bus drivers and it was easier to find van drivers. So it gets passed in the capital plan, but it can be changed later on too, is I guess what I'm saying through that process.
Superintendent, I guess my question, and this is where I wish the mayor were here, is that this capital plan has already gone through a public hearing and it's already been passed with a resolution at City Council last week for this FY22 expenditure of the bus replacement for the 30 passenger bus. I guess I'm not clear on whether that's something that can be undone once it's adopted. I mean, I think we can talk about future because we do this on a 5-year plan, but now that it's already gone to the city council and been adopted there, I'm not sure that this is something we can undo with a motion to this budget.
I can't really speak to the city process.
Can I say something on this exact topic? A year ago, we undid it because we changed our minds about what we wanted to buy. So 1 year ago, we were supposed to buy the bus we're now talking about. And somebody in the school department said we would be better off with vans for these reasons. And we all agreed and it changed and it was no problem. And during that time, we talked about making a plan and following through on progress in electric vehicles and figuring out how we're going to transition to those, which we have to do at some point. And there are grants, a lot of grants out there that somebody should look into. So we already did this a year ago. We changed our course completely. So I can't imagine the city council would say, don't reconsider this if you think there's a better way, and then we're taking your money away. I mean, we're trying to do what's right. And I don't know, maybe we'd get more grants. I think there's solutions to all these things. And if it's not this cycle, it should be next cycle. But if we don't get working on it, we're going to be behind and not take advantage of the grants and do the wrong thing. We talk about our high school students having all sorts of anxiety. Well, climate change is part of their anxiety. We have to start being leaders for this next generation and do what's right moving forward. And I think asking for us to have a conversation about if we can afford to and how we would transition to an electric vehicle is a really reasonable ask.
I guess, okay, so trying to, as my first time ever chairing, I guess what I'm saying is that is part of the capital improvement plan that we theoretically resubmit every year. It's the 5-year plan, and then it goes to city council. It did go to city council with this FY22 expenditure already and was adopted by them last week. And so I don't know if what you're saying is true as far as the timing. And I'm not comfortable doing something if I'm not sure that it's even allowable. It's not that I'm disagreeing either way about what you want to do. It's a process question. And part 2 of that is, I'm not even sure that it's germane to this discussion of this budget because it's a separate vote normally as the capital improvement vote normally. And don't we have a capital improvement committee, like a liaison to the capital improvement committee? Which member on the school committee is that? That's, oh, Member Levy. Do you have further information about this, or?
I've never been contacted about my role on this committee, so I have no information.
Well, just so people know, this was part of my email with lots of questions to Dr. Provost, and what he answered was that the item on the buses is part of this budget, and I would think it's the part that we're matching, I guess, from what I'm hearing. And he summarized his perspective of the work we did on budget and property, and then he said he'll review this with central services before they develop facility requests on behalf of the school. So I don't know either, Member Fallon. I'm sorry to put you in the position. I mean, I don't know the answer either.
I feel like we need a phone a friend option for tonight. Superintendent Provost.
So could I just suggest that this budget will run for the next 18 months? It doesn't even start until July 1st. It could be approved tonight, and the subcommittee could meet prior to moving forward on the bus and make recommendations. It's not like if you approve this budget today, I'm going to go down to the bus parking lot tomorrow and put down a down payment.
Thank you. Member Busansky.
Thanks. I just wanted to make sure we sort of wrapped up on this topic. Is that accurate? We're ready. Okay, so I just wanted to go back again to the NHS, mental health supports. And I, appreciate that you're going to be screening in May or June, but I really feel like that's just our practice is to put into the budget everything we think our kids need for the next year that we can afford, and not to add in later. For example, the SEL coach, which in the end we actually didn't ever fund or hire. And I can't move ahead with this budget. I'd really like us not to vote on it tonight and wait until next month and give Superintendent Provost a chance to talk again with his NHS, the all team in general, but especially the NHS leadership about this issue, and come back with a fuller proposal or put some additional money aside. I really appreciate Member Condon's point, and I always, and I appreciated it last year when he talked about it, but we are not in that same position in this post-pandemic time where we actually have funds available to spend to step in fast and help our kids. And to me, I think coming in with a strong plan and then deciding to remove it is one possibility if we don't need it. But anyway, that's the way I would like us to go. And I'd like us to postpone the vote until the next meeting so that we can see a fuller plan and more ideas, because I know there's a million more ideas than just, what we're seeing tonight.
As the parliamentarian, I'm just asking you, Member Busansky, is that a motion?
Can I make a motion to postpone the vote? Is that the question?
I'm asking you if that is the motion you are making.
Yes, that's the motion I'm making.
Is there a second?
A motion to postpone the vote till the next meeting.
Well, isn't there already a motion on the table that I made? Doesn't
Yeah.
that motion need to be resolved?
So there has been a motion made and seconded to approve the budget as presented. I guess we need to do a vote on that first. The motion to postpone, parliamentarian.
It's my understanding that a motion to table is germane when there's a motion on the floor, but I can ask Google to make sure that I'm right.
That would be my understanding as well. Otherwise, we'd have to actually vote down the budget in order to postpone the vote on the budget, and that just makes no sense.
While we're,
Member Voss has her hand up.
Member Voss.
thanks. While we're waiting, I just thought I'd chime in and say, I'm gonna support this motion at whatever place it comes, if it makes it that far, because I think there's another issue here that's really important, and that is through no fault of anyone who worked on the budget, this is really our first, what I feel like, public conversation of discussion. We certainly said things we wanted to see changes in, but just amongst us, and it was very short and late, and for good reason. There was really important COVID stuff going on. So Dr. Provost, this has nothing to do with your planning of this, but I just feel like this year, especially when so many families are struggling with their kids at school, we need to have time to put this out there, share our concerns, and hear what people have to say about it. And so that's another reason why I think it is worth waiting.
So what I have gathered is that I don't see any, my understanding, I think, is still true, that a motion to table is germane to an active motion, and a motion to table is not debatable. So there wouldn't be discussion. It would just be an up or down vote.
So,
Sorry, Member Fallon. I know this is a hot seat to be in.
so you all are giving me a breakdown.
Member Serapicas, can you share where you're reading that? Because I went to Google as well to learn about it. It seems that it says that has come up unexpectedly, right? Like, I don't know what's coming up unexpectedly here.
Tabling is if the board is not ready to vote, be it a lack of information, a sensitive topic, people need more information or time to process or deliberate, or yes, an urgent matter has come up. So yes, that is one of the possibilities, but there are many reasons to table.
Okay, so I think that first off, that I don't know that we are asking to postpone. I think we are specifically asking to table the vote to a specific meeting date, right?
Member Busanski, to the next meeting date, is that?
Yes, to the next meeting date, which I guess is April 8th. Which still leaves us enough time because we have to vote by April 15th is required by our city charter.
Right, I think that, yeah, because normally we would specifically
I mean, I believe we've been down this road before with rules and policies and other where we have tabled.
Right, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like,
It doesn't make any
honestly, I'm
sense to
just
vote
worried
on the
about
budget first.
the postpone versus the table to a
Oh, I
specific
see.
date. And so I think postponing to a certain time, I think that postponing to the next meeting is fine as far as language. So the motion has been made and seconded, and is that a majority or is that a 2/3? Emily, I'm sorry, member Seraphy Cox.
Majority.
Okay, a simple majority.
May I ask a question of the motion maker before we vote, or is that considered debating?
Okay with me.
So I won't say I'm against the idea. I'm just wondering, what would you hope to see or to happen between now and next meeting that would elucidate the issue or clarify things or make it more comprehensible?
Well, I mean, I guess, well, as I already said, I would hope to see a more thorough look into the mental health ideas for how to help our students' mental health needs at the high school. But having said that, I think that member Voss made a lot of really excellent points about why, in additional reasons that we really need to postpone and wait till the next meeting to vote. It feels like it is, you know, fair to the community and the feedback process for people to be able to, you know, listen to our conversation tonight and to add their thoughts, ideas, concern, and get that kind of feedback. So I would say all of the above.
Okay, I'm gonna say with this with a confidence that I may or may not feel, that there has been a motion to postpone to the next meeting, that it requires a simple majority vote. It will be a roll call vote. If the motion passes, this conversation, the budget vote, will go on our next meeting's agenda. If it fails, we will return to the main motion, which was made by member Condon, of voting on the budget this evening. And so with that being said, I think we're ready to vote on whether or not to postpone to the next meeting. So if the clerk could call the roll, please.
Member Condon,
Yes.
member Levy,
Yes.
member Goldman,
Yes.
member Voss,
Yes.
member Gold,
No.
member Busansky,
Yes.
member Fallon,
No.
and member Seraphy Cox.
Yes.
The vote is 6 in favor, 2 against.
Great, thank you. So that will go on our next agenda. So we move along then to the next item on our agenda, which is a vote to restore transportation for students in grades 7 through 12 who live more than 2 miles from school when their grades resume fully in-person instruction. And I'm going to invite Superintendent Provost to just give you the background on that before we put a motion on the floor.
Thank you. So, as I explained at the last meeting, the transportation social distancing guidelines that caused me to recommend moving to the mandatory minimum for transportation have been rescinded, and in any event can no longer be observed even to transport only students at the mandatory minimum now that we're starting fully in-person schooling. For that reason, I now recommend restoring transportation services for students in grades 7 through 12 once their grades join the fully in-person model. To save some capacity, I would still recommend starting transportation at 2 miles from school instead of 1.5, which has been our practice in the past, and charging a prorated rate of $55 for bus passes for the remainder of the year. Students eligible for a free reduced lunch would not be charged for a bus pass.
Thank you. Is there a motion to open this item for discussion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, a motion's been made and seconded to restore transportation for students in grades 7 to 12 who live more than 2 miles from school. Is there any discussion? Are there any questions? Member Voss?
I just want to confirm my understanding of this is would put the normal number of kids on the bus, so 2 kids in a seat, basically. Well, younger,
Correct.
I guess.
It would allow buses to run at their listed capacity.
Okay, and so I'm just gonna say, I guess Massachusetts says this is okay. I'm really struggling with it. I want the buses to run, but in the current situation of the numbers of COVID going up, the strains that are being found and hardly being tested for in our state, and much more problematic for kids. And if you look at the numbers of COVID cases among kids, they're going up. And this has all changed in the last few weeks. I'm really, really concerned about putting kids right on top of each other on a bus. And so I'm struggling. And I guess a question I have for you, Dr. Provost, is can we use some of our stimulus funds and have more buses so that we can bus kids in a safer way?
The constraint is not the number of buses that we're contracting for or financial. The constraint is the capacity of the transportation providers. As you may recall, one of the challenges we dealt with the fall before the start of COVID was our buses weren't running on time because there was a nationwide shortage of bus drivers. We were pulling bus drivers out of Worcester to try to cover our routes, et cetera. Under our contract, our provider is only able to provide a certain number of buses to us. That's all they can guarantee. We have had discussions, but that national shortage persists. And, you could double the transportation budget. I think you'd still have the same number of buses that we're able to run locally.
Okay, well, my other creative solution is to ask you, can we ask families to only use the bus if they really need it and have some sort of lottery for seats if it's past capacity? Because I can't support putting kids that close on a bus, given what I understand about how this disease spreads. I just can't support it.
In my letter to families regarding changes to transportation that are probably upcoming, I did encourage them to transport their own students if they could. I also encouraged them to take advantage of walking school buses, have students ride their bike to school, all of that. I'm not sure what you mean if buses are beyond capacity, because we in no case can loaded bus past capacity. Even in prior to COVID times, you can't put more students on the bus than they're listed to carry.
I didn't mean to say past capacity, but the current capacity is a lot of kids based on all the data we crunched for a late start and figuring out bus schedules. There's a lot of people on some of these buses. And I guess if I had a better sense of how many might actually be taking it, or if we could limit it, and I'm a lot less worried about losing money on 2 months worth of busing, especially since we have stimulus money to offset costs of COVID. And this is a clear cost of COVID. So I don't know if you have any ideas of extra routes, extra tiers. Is there anything we can do to keep the kids further apart from each other on the buses? And the other question is, I assume we'd have windows down on the buses. Is that part of it?
We'd have windows down. We'd have students masked. I really think that the best solutions are having individuals use different forms of transport if they can. But I'll just tell you, in conversations with many families who've spoken to me since we started hybrid, I've had people say, I'd love to participate in the hybrid model, but I can't do that because I need transportation right now. And, I'm not eligible because my child's in 7th grade or my child's in 8th grade. I know that there are families who want our educational services and are not able to access them. So I would be opposed to a lottery or something that might still keep them out of the schools they'd like to attend. So that's really what I would say. I don't think within our structures we can really add routes or rebalance routes, because then the times will be off. And as I said, I don't think we can add buses, but we can, facilitate the other modes of transportation. And at the high school, for example, most, you've seen the bike racks, that school shouldn't be able to run on 3 buses, but it does because so many people use alternate forms of transportation. I think there will be a lot in 7th and 8th grade that do that as well. And there will be a lot in the earlier grades that do that. But I just think that it doesn't make sense to say we are breaking the limit on social distancing because we have to do that for the elementary students, and then are saying we're holding the 7th through 12th graders off because of social distancing that we're not observing for the younger students.
You're muted, Member Fallon.
Sorry, I was saying Member Seraphy Cox, your hand was up.
Yeah, I think that that Superintendent Provost answered my question. Yeah, I'm still kind of on the fence about this. I guess maybe I'll ask it, but I kind of feel like you have already answered parts of it at least. What would be the No, I'm sorry. You did already answer it now that I'm thinking back on what you said. Okay, never mind.
Okay, seeing no other hands, a motion's been made and seconded to restore transportation for students in grades 7 through 12 who live more than 2 miles from school. Annie, would you call the roll, please?
Member Levy. Member Goldman.
Yes.
Member Voss.
I'm abstaining.
Member Gold.
Yes.
Member Busansky.
Yes.
Member Fallon.
Yes.
Member Seraphy Cox.
No.
Member Condon.
Yes.
The vote is 6 in favor, 1 against, and 1 abstention.
The motion passes. Okay, the final item under new business we have is a vote to authorize the superintendent to begin negotiations with a business administrator candidate or to reopen the search. And I would like Dr. Provost to take a minute to bring the committee up to date on that.
Sure. At the last meeting, the committee voted to authorize me to enter into negotiations with Courtney Laborious. We had a long negotiation, lasted over a week. I think that the candidate was very excited about coming to Northampton and understood the benefits package being offered. However, what I don't think the candidate realized was how the Massachusetts teachers retirement system worked. She was coming from another state where school business administrators are not required to belong to teachers retirement. And as someone coming into the system in Massachusetts, she would have been subject to an 11% charge for the MTRS. And I think that made the position untenable for her, even at the upper end of the range. So when we reached an impasse there, I reached out to the other 2 candidates who were brought forward as finalists to ask them if they were still interested, if the committee was interested in them. At that time, Bobby Lee Jones withdrew. And so the remaining candidate that you have is Angela Wang. So the question before the committee tonight is whether you'd like me to begin the process with Angela or whether you'd like to restart the search.
Thank you. Is there a motion to open this topic for discussion? Member Seraphy Cox.
I'd like to make a motion to direct the superintendent to reopen the search.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to direct the superintendent to reopen the search. Is there any discussion? Member Serapy Cox and Member Levy, your hands are up, but was that to make the motion and second?
Correct.
Oh, okay. So Member Levy, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, thanks. Superintendent Provost, I'd like to hear your preference on this. Would you rather hire the remaining candidate or reopen the search from scratch, start again?
That's a really hard question. I think that we've seen the best candidates that are out there. We just finished the search a month ago. There may be a few new candidates out there. I think a likely outcome will be that there will be candidates possibly with less experience coming forward. So that's a danger of doing research, another search. If that's the case, I guess I would just say that members should know that and not say, if this next batch looks, wanting in comparison to the first one, that they not, that they bear that in mind, that that's kind of the risk of doing another search right now. I think, we were divided, as I said, among the search committee. I would also share in just what I've heard from feedback from different members of the committee who've talked to me. There's divisions. I would really love to have a candidate that everyone is behind rather than one that comes in with sort of divisions. And so another search is attractive to me for that reason. But, that being said, if there was interest in this candidate, I think she certainly has the skills we were looking for.
Okay, thanks. And then my other question, I imagine you probably exhausted all of your options with in your negotiations with Courtney. I guess I'm just wondering if that 11%, could we raise the salary enough to meet it halfway so that maybe, half of that 11% was compensated in the salary?
I didn't go there because I didn't have the authorization to do that. The school committee could do that. I would say that would cause some pay equity issues with other folks. So there's some other people who would need to be realigned. But if that's something the committee wants to do, I'd be happy to take that back to Courtney.
I would be curious to hear what other members of the committee think. But I guess it would be helpful to know, and you may not know the answer to this, and I'm not sure you can necessarily say in public, but I would be interested to know, what does that mean in terms of pay equity? What are we looking at in terms of both meeting that salary for her, or raising the salary for her, and then meeting the pay equity for others, like lump sum? I don't know if you know that.
I don't know what the total figure would be for all the individuals involved. I would imagine there would probably be about 7 other people who would probably need an adjustment.
Okay, thanks.
Member Gould.
Couple questions. So one thing, the suggestion of offering it to the one remaining candidate, that also came with the possibility of hiring Cami, is that correct, as a mentor of sorts?
Mm-hmm.
So there is that feature, I think, that's important as we're assessing that. I guess I would also like to know, is there anything that we would want to know further that would help us decide whether we want to hire the remaining candidate? I'm sorry, I want to say Angela, but I feel like it's not right. I'm sorry if I'm not saying her name correctly. But yeah, I'm wondering, like, what other information might we want to need that would give us more confidence? I did hear from a few committee members that we actually preferred her based on the interviews that day. So I'm wondering from fellow school committee members about that piece. And I guess lastly, I'll throw out there, I was a little bit surprised that someone applying for this position was not aware previously, specifically because this position involves budgeting and finance, the impact of the salary difference. So that surprised me that that's what broke the deal this time. And so I would prefer not going back there at this point. That's my inclination.
Member Busanski.
Thank you. So I'm curious, Dr. Provost, about the timing. Can you just remind me Cammie's timing for departure? Again, where we're at?
Her contract expires at the end of June. She has a lot of vacation time that she will be taking, probably starting in about 5 days.
Got it. So just thinking, just thinking back, we started the search committee process on around February 1st, I believe. And so here we are, 7 weeks in. I mean, obviously we could do a more abbreviated process, but I can't imagine that it's going to get much more abbreviated than, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. I don't know. Maybe you have a recommendation. And given, what you said about, it's not going to be a much different pool that we're going to get this time. It feels to me, and of course, I guess I am kind of biased because I did feel, good about Angela. So I feel comfortable. If you feel comfortable, Dr. Provost, and I'll go back to that original question that was posed to you, but if you feel comfortable, then I would be supportive of going ahead and offering the position to Angela. And in terms of our, first choice, Courtney, I think it sounds to me like 7 other adjustments of salaries would be sort of an untenable situation. So I would stay away from going back to her, even though I liked the creative thinking behind that idea, but.
So, there's a lot of hesitancy on behalf of the committee. There is hesitancy on behalf of the hiring committee. I will share that Angela was my number 2, but she was not the number 2 of everyone within that group or everyone within the committee. And, that would be my concern. What I think would happen if we were to redo the search is we would probably end up with someone who was coming in with less experience, maybe someone who we didn't bring in for an interview in that first batch because of lack of experience. And even with that, I think I would still make the same recommendation that we have the person involved with MASBO, we have the person involved with CAMI, and really train that person up.
Member Goldman.
Thank you. Just because someone asked what other members were thinking, I also am inclined to recommend moving away from the first candidate and asking Dr. Provost to move forward with offering the position to Angela. With the training piece with Cammie.
Member Buss.
I don't have a strong opinion, but just like Member Goldman, since you asked, I guess I want to hear Dr. Provost. Would you? I was comfortable with Angela. We hardly interviewed them, so it's a lot less for us to say than your other group. But and so I could support what members Busanski and Goldman just said very much. But I guess my question for you is, would you want us to cost out what it would take to pay her more and go back? Do you think she'd even say yes? Or do you think we should move ahead? Like, where do you fall on that?
If there was a way to make it work with Courtney, obviously that would be my preference. I would want to make sure that everyone else was taken care of too. I feel like she was a unifying force, right? There was strong support among everyone in the screening committee. I felt like after discussion, the committee was able to get behind her. And that means a lot coming into a position. So I would not be uncomfortable with raising the salary.
I thought her answers to the questions about, some of the questions were really thoughtful in a way that was special. And so for that reason, that's why I asked you that question. And I don't have a good sense of the range of what business administrators get paid, but I do feel like in Northampton, we often don't pay people as much as surrounding communities. And that's something, if we want to get really good people, we're going to have to talk about and make choices about. So I'm open to talking about offering her more if we think she's really special. And that sounds to me like the committee thought she was special. But I'm also comfortable with going number 2. I don't really know.
Member Levy?
I will say that I did think that, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name of the person who we offered to. Courtney?
Courtney,
Okay, thanks.
Courtney Laborious.
I did also think that she had some really great answers. I thought Angela had some really great answers too. And I was actually torn between the two. I thought they were heads and shoulders above the third in our interaction. And I agree, it was a short interaction, and you and your committee had a longer interactions. But my question is, have you checked references already? Do you have the background? I believe you did, but just want to make sure that she has already been fully vetted and we have a sense of her. Not
Yeah, so I checked references on all 3 candidates. I'll just be frank. I would have liked different references for both Courtney and Angela. Neither one of them were listing their current employer, which always is concerning to me. I did get good references from the people who they had listed, though.
Okay. So my understanding is, so again, not having done this in a public entity, that contacting current supervisor, even if they're not listed as a reference, is okay to do, is it not?
We did request permission, but we're asked not to.
Huh. Okay. Well, I will second what Member Voss said. I agree that if what we want to do is get really stellar folks, then being willing to pay more, I think is a part of it. And so I would support raising the salary for the 7 other folks too. Again, not really knowing what that means dollar wise. It's hard to really say that, but to let you be the one to determine whether that is worth it. And if that's not worth it, I don't have huge reservations about Angela.
Member Busansky.
Thank you. I feel like we're in this kind of circular motion where we keep wanting to turn to you, Dr. Provost, and have you give us direction, and you keep turning back to us and saying it's up to us to give you direction. And yet it does kind of feel like you're a little bit the keeper of most information, all of the information. And you're in that kind of key position where this person is really going to be critical to supporting you and supporting the district and everything. I wish, and I also just wish that we did have Cammie on the call, just because it'd be great to have a better sense of what that would mean, those 7 other adjustments. I mean, if we're talking about going back to Courtney and offering an additional, half, I guess was, would be about $6,500. But what does that mean for those 7 other positions as well? And I think she didn't, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Provost, but she didn't really understand what it meant to move to the Massachusetts system. They don't have this requirement in
That's correct.
Connecticut, right?
That's
so
correct.
I don't think it's a, budgeting or a finance issue, is more just not understanding the Massachusetts system and that there'd be this additional. So, so that's, so I would be all for, if you really think it's doable, to adjust the 7 other salaries, though I'd really like to know the cost of it. I could see going back to Courtney. Having been on the search committee and in that longer interview, I really think what was really, really great and worth it, and why she was above, heads and tails above the other 2 candidates, and how she, again, what Dr. Provost said, that everyone, unanimous, it was unanimous, and we were all coming at it from, different perspectives, and yet we all thought she'd just be such an addition. Or I could see going with Angela. It makes me a little nervous to reopen the search, unless, again, Dr. Provost, feel free to give us some direction.
So I feel you requesting something really definitive for me. So what I would say would be helpful is if the committee gave a figure for Courtney, said throw it out there, and if that doesn't work, immediately go into negotiations with Angela.
Yes, though I just want to add to that, it's since we're just not clear on what else it would cost us in those additional 7 adjustments, approximately 7 adjustments, right? That's what I was trying to point out.
Right. Well, I would think you would have to do something comparable for the others as well.
Right. So we're really talking about, $45,000, $50,000 additional.
Yeah.
What makes me nervous about that is that is then, every year as they get raises, that is their rate of pay, and we go down that road. It's an additional, personnel expense. So.
Okay, I will continue. There's still more hands up, 3 more, but I will remind you guys that the current motion on the table that's been made and seconded, is to direct the superintendent to reopen the search. So I don't know if any of you are making motions to amend, or if you have conversations or questions, but next up we have Member Gold.
I'd like to make a motion to table this vote until our next school committee meeting, so that we can have the information as to how much this would actually cost with the additional, making all the other funding levels, those other 7 positions, before we go ahead.
Is there a second? Seeing none, motion does not carry. Did you have questions or anything else to say? Okay, moving on to the next hand, we have, is it possible we have Member Voss?
Yeah, I think so. I have a question, and then I'm going to try to ask if I can change the motion. Dr. Provost, my question is, first of all, do you sense that if we went back to Courtney, there would be interest in a raised salary? Is this a fruitful path to follow? And I'm worried about losing both of them. So I'll just say that if we don't act, I don't know that we're going to get anyone, and we have somebody leaving. But do you get the sense she would be interested if you could offer her more?
Well, it was only about money in the end, right? She liked the district, she liked the team.
And is there a way, it's about the retirement money, is, in a private university, you have ways of spinning these things. Is there a way for us to contribute more to her retirement? And, maybe it's apples and oranges with some of our other employees, because she's new and there's a different situation, and it doesn't have to be in salary. Are there creative ways to do that? Have we explored that?
It's a payroll deduction. There's really no way around it, and it's a statute.
Okay. So I guess where I'm landing is, I know how understaffed that central services is, and we need really good people to support it. And if you're comfortable with the idea of the amount that we would have to find in the budget to pay people what it costs to hire them to do this level of a job, I'm comfortable supporting that. So I guess I would ask you, if I'm about to make a motion, how much would you like in my motion? Because you're the one's gonna have to help us find the money too in the future. What is a reasonable amount for us to give you to,
I think we say 5,000 and it works or it doesn't.
okay, so how do I go about can I make a friendly amendment?
You can offer a friendly amendment to me.
I'm gonna offer an amendment to you, which is very different from what's on the table, but I'm gonna ask
Understood.
if we could, or I guess I could ask if you want to take your motion off the table. Is that
Yeah.
better?
Just talk and I will probably
Okay,
say
so
yes.
what I would like the motion to be is, or to offer the amendment to you, is that we ask the superintendent to go back to Courtney Laborious with an increase of $5,000, up to $5,000. And if she rejects that, to then enter into negotiations with, is it Angela Wang? Is that her name? With Angela Wang.
Okay, yes, that is a friendly amendment.
So you want to accept that entire amendment to replace what you had previously said?
Yes, because clearly there is not appetite on the committee to reopen. I have to say I'm not super excited about Angela Wang, but I understand that we're a little bit between a rock and a hard place.
Okay. Member Goldman, did you still want to contribute?
Yeah, I guess I'm comfortable with what's on the table, but it just makes me question, and this isn't the first time, we're making adjustments to what we offer in salaries, but I just do ask members to be mindful of sort of our process for creating fair and equitable salaries and compensation across the board as employers for all of our employees, and thinking about all of the debate and movement about, $5,000 or whatever the amounts are that we're working with on our budget. Just really taking that seriously and considering expanding the salary for this position. It sounds like Courtney's really worth fighting for, though. So that's encouraging, because Hammy is impossible to beat.
Thank you. Member Levy.
Sorry, I should have removed my hand. Member Voss made the motion that I would have made, and I'll just say Member Gold. The difference about it is I don't think we have time to wait until our next meeting.
Member Gold, was your hand up? Okay.
Yeah, just to make sure I'm doing my math right here. I mean, if she had a problem with 11%, we're offering her a third of that by going up by $5,000. Like, so we're not, I mean, if we're worried about timing here, I get what you're saying, Member Levy. Like, we're saying we'll cover 5,000 of it. Some of that 5,000 would then go into the 11% that she would be losing, so she really wouldn't be getting 5,000 as an increase. And there's a lot of if we have a budgetary responsibility, there's a lot of financial implications here for other positions. And I'm frustrated that we're making that without actually knowing the numbers. And also, I appreciate what Member Goldman said, and really thoughtfully thinking about the implications of job equity and attainability for people with this. So last thing I'll say is Dr. Provost did share with us that he offered her the highest possible salary for this position. So.
Member Levy, your hand's up.
Yeah, I guess I didn't read it that way. I read that he offered at the top end, like close to the top, but I'm not sure if it was the top. So that would be a question for the superintendent. And I guess to me, maybe I need to hear the motion again. I do think 6.5%. Sorry, 5.5%. How's my math? And meeting halfway is what I would suggest. And then the other thing is that I think what the motion said was that we're asking the superintendent to, I think, and again, I want to hear the motion again, to first do the math and to see what is the dollar amount that others would need to be raised as well, and to use his judgment as to whether that's the right thing to do in this case. So Susan, or Member Voss, could you repeat the motion?
Yeah, I used his recommendation of $5,000, which it looks like 7,100 something, so would be 5.5%. So I'll repeat, I'll see if Member Seraphy Cox wants to accept a different friendly amendment, because I agree with what you just said. So do you want to word it? Do you want to say it?
Well, I guess to me, what I would say is something along the lines of the superintendent taking a look at the salaries that would need to be adjusted in order to offer $7,000 more to Courtney. And if the superintendent feels that it is within the interest of the district to make those adjustments in order to offer a more, this is too long for a motion. I just end it there. If the superintendent feels it is within the interest of the district to make those adjustments and offer Courtney 7,000 to move forward with that. If that does not work out financially for the district, and or if Courtney does not accept the 7,000, then we should offer to Angela.
Why don't you say 5.5%, not 7,000?
Okay, 5.5%.
Member Seraphy Cox, was that?
Yes, I'm okay with that, replacing the already replaced amendment.
It's really unrecognizable as your motion at this point, to be honest, but it has been made and seconded. Is there any more discussion? Member Busanski?
Yeah, I just wanted to check back in with Dr. Provost and make sure you feel like you have clear direction here and understanding, and this feels helpful to you. Or
I think it was the last piece made it a little bit fuzzier. It was clear to me when it was in amount, make the offer, and if it doesn't work, move on. But
yeah.
7,120. The thing is, I don't know if the offered salary is what I'm basing that on. 7,100.
Well, I can't answer that question very definitively. I did offer the 130.
Okay, then I think what we're saying is up to 7,150, but somebody could check me on that. I think that 5.5% of $130,000 is 7,150. So do you want us to tell you that number?
I think you just did.
All right, so can we exchange, Member Seraphy Cox, the latest friendly amendment is to make the number 7,150.
Sorry, and just to follow up, go ahead, Member Seraphy Cox.
Oh, I almost just kind of feel like I should rescind my motion at this point and just let you make that motion, because this is getting too complicated. So I rescind my motion and now you can make a motion.
Okay. Member Levy, do you want me to try? Okay. The motion is to give Dr. Provost direction to re-enter negotiations with Courtney Laborious and offer her up to $7,150. More in salary, as long as he feels that the implications will overall benefit the district. If that fails, to go ahead and negotiate with Angela Wang.
Can you repeat that, please?
You're kidding, right?
No, sorry.
Okay.
You want to type it up, Member
Do
Voss?
you want me to put my thing up and try to type it for us?
I think that could be helpful.
I can repeat it for you.
Thanks, Andy.
To give Dr. Provost direction to re-enter negotiations with Courtney Laborious and offer up to $7,150 as long as he feels the implications will benefit the district. If that fails, to enter into negotiations with Angela Wang. Is that correct?
And I think we all understand the
sorry.
benefit the district takes into account the additional money that will need to be spent.
Right. We're
So
giving
that was
Dr.
there a
Provost
second?
that discretion. Is there a second?
Second.
And then one more question. And then I assume
For a while.
if, you know, action 1 fails, action 2 fails, you just automatically reopen the search anyway. So there's really no reason to.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think Member Gold has had his hand up for a little
Oh,
while.
I'm sorry. Member Gold.
I think we really need to think about what we're doing here, because that 11%, it might not be the quantity of money she is getting, but what happens to that money, right? The 11% is going into the MTRS. It's not as if she were making up that difference necessarily, right? Like she's not, maybe there's another retirement, something that she has, how many years she has, and that it's going to take her to recoup that money effectively. Like there's all of those implications that have to be taken into consideration here. If we are worried about the timeline, I think that's something really important to consider before we offer someone additional money. The other thing being, what does this then mean to what we would be offering Angela, right? Like, so if we're going and we're making this condition, right, and we're setting ourselves up to say, you know what, like we're willing to, you know, I worry that we're going to seem as if we're desperate, or what, for lack of a better word, and it just doesn't come off. It doesn't come off right. I think that we made a very fair offer, and I would really hope that we just vote no on this and vote to accept Angela, which was the superintendent provost's second choice. Clearly was his second choice, he said.
So I don't know if I'm technically supposed to pass the gavel or not to just offer my thoughts on this, but I do want to say I'm a bit concerned. The most recent fiscal year earnings I can pull up are from 2020, but I mean, with this pay raise, she would be earning so close to the top of all of our employees in the city of Northampton. And looking at, I mean, even what Susan Wright was earning after 36 years, or 34 years, I guess, or 33 years, because this is a little bit older, but like it does worry me that we haven't had Cammie weigh in on this. We haven't had the mayor weigh in on this as far as keeping the balance in the city, and how far up we're going to have to bring others to meet this. So I'm a little uncomfortable with us making these decisions on the fly with no, with the mayor not here and the business administrator not here to weigh in. But I am by nature cautious, as you all know. So if there's no further discussion, there is a motion made by, Member Busanski.
I really, I respect what you're saying, and I just wonder if that's kind of a little bit of the, homework that in that motion is built in, that we just don't, time is just not on our side with this one. And it would be good to have Dr. Provost, to have you check in with Cammie and with the mayor about this, if you think that's possible. And we're really giving Dr. Provost, I think, discretion on this to move ahead as he sees fit. We are not saying that he has to make this offer or even offer $7,150. So what we're just really saying is that we're giving him some discretion to move ahead. That's how I see it. But Dr. Provost, is that how you're also interpreting it?
It is, although this is a public discussion, so it's what your offer is known now, right?
Yeah.
So,
But but baked into that offer is looking at what other pay raises would have to happen and,
Right.
aligning it with city needs and,
Right, and I can tell you that before posting this, I did look at, other comparable districts. I found all the comparators. I felt like the range we offered was right on par. And I did discuss that with the mayor, and I think he was comfortable with that, with 130 as the top as well. So there's that.
Okay, we have a motion made by Member Voss, seconded, and there seems to be no further discussion. I would ask the clerk to call the roll.
Member Goldman,
No.
Member Voss,
Yes.
Member Gold,
No.
Member Busansky,
yes.
Member Fallon,
No.
Member Seraphy Cox,
Yes.
Member Condon, Member Condon,
No.
Member Levy,
Yes.
the vote is split, 4 in favor and 4 against.
So, so it does not pass. Is there another motion that someone would like to make? We need a majority for a motion that's made to pass, and a tie is not a majority. So we'll need someone to put forth a new motion. Obviously, I would urge you to change something enough that we don't end up with an identical 4-4 split again. So if someone could be, Member Gold.
A motion to approve Dr. Provost entering in negotiations directly with Angela.
Is there a second?
Second?
A motion has been made and seconded to enter negotiations with Angela Wang. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Member Voss,
No.
Member Gold,
Yes.
Member Busansky,
No.
Member Fallon,
Yes.
Member Seraphy Cox,
No.
Member Condon,
Yes.
Member Levy,
No.
and Member Goldman.
No.
The vote is 5 against and 3 in favor.
Oh, Member Goldman, we all feel it. We saw you wrestling with that. It's a hard position to be in. Okay, so that is it for the items on the agenda.
Are we, do we?
We make another mess.
What do we do? Yeah.
Because we've made enough motions, right?
Well, right, there's no candidates left, so I have to restart the process.
I have a
Oh,
question.
you want it? Okay, so I thought there were no more options. So we're not offering it to her. We're not offering more money. So is there another motion? I thought that automatically meant that we need to reopen it. Am I wrong?
I don't think so.
Member Goldman, your hand's up.
Thank you. I feel like it might be helpful if I made myself a little clear to help us come up with a new motion. I do appreciate a motion where I'm sorry. I wasn't expecting this. I clearly do prefer offering this to Angela. And I do wonder if there is a way to bring, I guess the question is it true? Is it the case that Courtney won't take the position if we don't offer more than 130? That's the case, right?
That's definitely true.
Okay. I do support, offering people proper salaries. I just wonder what the process is for making those ranges, and it feels haphazard to create those opportunities in this way. I'm wondering if anyone has any comments. I'd like to make a motion, but I don't have one
Okay.
available.
I see the superintendent wants to address your question about the salary range.
So we do the salary range much in the same way we would go into collective bargaining. We look at comparator districts. We look at districts of similar size with similar finances and similar central office setup, and then develop a range from there. So one of the ones that I've always said is a really good comparator for us is Ludlow. Those who've been on negotiations hear me say that many times, but they're a group of about, I would say, 10 districts that we look at, and we see what the ranges are in those districts. And that's what we use to set the low and the high.
Member Voss.
I'm going to try once more, and I'm going to say, I think it's really important we hire somebody, and we need to figure this out. And time is of essence. And I'm just really trying to support the superintendent here. And I completely understand people worried about the extra money. Where I'm coming from, and I think, Member Goldman, it might be what you're feeling, I'm not sure, but I'm not excited to spend more money, but from the few answers I heard, I felt like we had a pretty special candidate, and that's why Dr. Provost spent so much energy trying to work this out. And honestly, if we go back with a few $1,000s, I'm not really sure we're gonna get her, but it just feels like when you have a special candidate, you wanna make the best offer you really feel is responsible to make. And that's where I'm comfortable going a little bit over this range. We've seen that happen before. We've had people in our own district come back. We've had executive sessions about it. We need to pay them more to keep really good people here. So I would like to try once more, if you don't mind, Chair Fallon. And I'm really willing to take input onto the amount I put on it, and it will be lower than 7,150, but I'd like to give him the flexibility of reaching out once more to Courtney Laborious, and if that does not go anywhere, to then reach out to Angela Wang. And so he had suggested 5,000. Is that too much for people? I'd like to give him some latitude in working through this and getting to the best solution that's going to be for his office as soon as possible.
Can I just ask a practical question, Member of us? So this is all public. If we offer this additional money to Courtney Laborious and she declines, and now we go into negotiations with Ms. Wang, and she says, I'd like the same amount of money that you were inclined to offer, I guess, does the superintendent need to bring that back to us? Is that, like, I
don't think we're offering it to the.
Okay, so I just
Angela
wanted to
Wang.
be clear.
There were two candidates. They have different levels of experience. They have different levels of things our district is interested in particular, some of the work they've done that we read about in their applications. And we have, that's why we're doing this last little bit. And I'm not expecting there's going to be a change even, but I think it's been expressed that he really wants to try, and I'd like to support it. And I think if we did get somebody extra with this extra experience that our district could really use, that would be great. And if not, I think Angela Wang would be fantastic. And I said that at the meeting. And so I don't want to give the impression that we shouldn't ask her, but I just want to enable him to do both of these things. So I'll let somebody else make the motion with a smaller amount of money, and whatever comes up, I like that.
Superintendent has his hand up first.
Yeah. So now I'm getting really confused because after a motion to offer more money failed, it was a straight motion to offer the position to Angela, and that also failed. So I don't know why we would go back to Angela if this one doesn't work in your motion.
I can say I voted against it. I wasn't happy with the fact that we weren't figuring out a way to be more creative about the options. That's all. I have no problem with Angela.
So currently I see no hands up. I have no motion on the table. It is 9:30. Member Levy.
So I would move that I move the same motion that member Voss moved earlier, but the dollar amount be 5,000 with the same stipulation that it's up to the superintendent's discretion if that dollar amount then puts the district at a disadvantage in any way. So same exact motion, Annie, except changing the dollar amount to 5,000. And I would just, for the sake of discussion, echo what Member Voss said, that I still support offering to Angela as a backup plan. I didn't vote for that as an initial plan because I think if what the superintendent, and again, I'm listening to the superintendent, and he has said that he would like to make it work with Courtney. And so I think it's worth trying to make it work one last time.
Okay, a motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion on the table. It's been seconded. Is there any discussion? Member Gold.
You're muted.
So now we're publicly voting to reduce how much we're trying to, like, the problem was we didn't give her enough money, right? We thought that that's what the problem was. And now we're saying, we're gonna try again and try to recoup how much you were losing to retirement by paying you even less. It just doesn't, right? Like, we're going from 7,000 down to 5,000.
No, it's still 5,000 in addition to what we had offered before. It's still offering more. It's not offering quite as much more because the school committee wouldn't support that.
Right, I guess what I'm saying, we're offering her, so we're trying to offer her now, we're trying to offer less. We originally were
Less
offering
than-
7,500, and now we're going down to 5,000 to address the issue of the $15,000 that she's losing, that is going towards her to retirement, to MTRS. I just want to make.
I'm not sure I understand your question. You're saying you just want to clarify that we're offering now 5,000 instead of 7,000, correct? And the reason for that is the school committee didn't support offering 7,000. And if there are people who are worried about equity in the district, perhaps that makes equity in the district a little bit less of an issue. And perhaps there's a little bit less that we need to do as a district in order to ensure equity across pay. I would say that I appreciate that there are other districts that we're using as a comparison point. And I'm sure, or I imagine you're taking into account superintendent cost of living in those districts and things like that. And I think in the grand scheme of things, in my mind, what this does is it's a gesture to Courtney to let her know. I mean, I think it sounds like the superintendent has already let her know that she's highly desired by our district. And this is just a gesture by us, the school committee. I mean, I don't know what all the issues are with having to put the money into a retirement account. I understand that being a surprise and it changing the bottom line. Again, I hope she'll see this not as a loss, but as our reaching out to say, you're our top candidate. We want to make this as desirable as we can for you.
Member Busansky.
I think I really just want to echo everything Member Levy said, is that this is a gesture, and this often happens in the world of job offers. It's just not often that you have to negotiate the terms in public. But this is, if the 7,150 got voted down by this committee for, many reasons, including that, we're not, we only have certain financial capabilities, but we feel comfortable with 5,000, that we can afford to offer 5,000 with, or at least give the superintendent that discretion to look into offering that 5,000, then, she will either appreciate that we're going above and beyond because we really want her, or she won't, and we can't pay the entire, 11%. And this is genuinely the best we can do. And if not, then we walk away and we move on to Angela, who I think is, a very good candidate. So my long way of saying, I just am seconding what Member Levy said.
Member Goldman, you no longer, okay. Member Condon.
I just want to remind people that even going down to the 5,000 isn't just 5,000. It still would involve raising the salaries of the other 7 people involved. So we are, there's a little bit of a deduction there, but it's still larger than 5,000, something to keep in mind.
Member Levy.
And that is why we have the condition that after the superintendent does the math, he can also decide that it's not in the best interest of the district if it ends up being too much that we would need to alter the other salaries.
Okay, Member Goldman.
I'll vote yes for this motion.
I don't see any other hands. So the motion that is on the table, the motion that's been made and seconded is to offer Courtney Laborious, was it ultimately the percentage or the number?
Up to 5,000.
5,000.
Up to 5,000. Okay. Annie, would you call the roll, please?
Member Gold,
No.
Member Busansky,
Yes.
Member Fallon,
No.
Member Seraphy Cox,
Yes.
Member Condon,
No.
Member Levy,
Yes.
Member Goldman,
Member Goldman, you're muted.
Excuse me, I said yes.
and Member Voss.
Yes.
The vote is 5 in favor and 3 against.
Okay, so the motion carries. Now we have a plan. That is the end of those items on the agenda. Before we move to the executive session, I would like to just announce the future business and meeting dates. All meetings will be held via Zoom conferencing until further notice. We have a superintendent evaluation subcommittee scheduled for Thursday, April 1st at 3:30 p.m. The Student Advisory Council, Thursday, April 8th at 6:15 p.m. The regular school committee meeting on Thursday, April 8th at 6:45 p.m. A school committee meeting Thursday, April 22nd at 6:45 p.m. And then the first school committee retreat on Thursday, April 29th at 7 p.m. and the second school committee retreat on Thursday, June 17th at 6:30 p.m. The next item on our agenda is an executive session. Would someone like to make a motion?
I will make a motion to enter executive session under Massachusetts General Open Meeting, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and before we have the roll call vote to enter into executive session, I would like to let the public know that we will be adjourning from executive session. We will not be returning to public session. Annie, would you call the roll, please?
Member Busansky,
Yes.
Member Fallon,
Yes.
Member Seraphy Cox,
Yes.
Member Condon,
Yes.
Member Levy,
Yes.
Member Goldman,
Yes.
Member Voss,
Yes.
and Member Gold.
Yes.
The vote is 8 in favor.
Thank you. So as I mentioned to the public, our meeting will be going into executive session now, and we will be adjourning from executive session, not be returning to open meetings. So if you are still